And today he's going to be talking about blockchain and Web3 and just kind of the future of smart contracts and cryptocurrency, that kind of thing. So without further ado, let's welcome Robbie.
Hey guys. Firstly, thank you for taking time out of your Friday to be part of this presentation. I really appreciate it, and I'm also quite excited to share not only at a higher level of like what really blockchain is and how it can have really interesting use cases, but beyond that, if you're interested in participating or kind of contributing to this space, how kind of everyone in this chair, without even knowing you guys, know that you can already contribute. And this isn't assuming anything from like a developer perspective, but this is if you're interested in design, research, auditing. I mean, there are a number of ways that we can pull people in. And right now, the space is still quite young. Think of when the internet was at its 56K phase, right? Where it was like clunky and awkward and a little cumbersome. And a lot of people were like, this isn't going to take off. I would never put my credit card online. That's for, hackers. There was a lot of naysay against it and a lot of question around that. And we see technology above all else, I think, grows at an exponential rate. So we've seen how quickly we've made huge advancements to even like thinking about life before a smartphone. Is like you almost like forget like what was that like sort of thing. So technology is growing quite quickly, and I would say that blockchain is in obviously that category, but it's growing even faster than our traditional, let's call it Web 2 technology. So I do appreciate the time that everyone's taken to explore that. So I have a couple of things to share. I've got a little deck, and then I have a couple of applications, some that I've made and some that are currently available, along with some resources that I'd love to share with everyone. So I will start out with a deck. So let's go ahead and let's share this screen. Okay, so just a double check here. Do we have eyes on this? Can I get a thumbs up?
Yeah.
Awesome, great.
Looks good.
Cool. So the name of this is going to be Breaking into Blockchain. It's going to be leveraging your current abilities and building in a new space, right? So we'll kick things off. An immediate question I have, and as I go through this, I want to preface by saying I always want to make this an open conversation. So at any point, if anyone has anything that they want to ask, please just pipe up. I want this to just be like very free flowing. But if I do get just some nods, or if no one's piping up, then I'm just going to kind of keep cruising. But at a certain point, I will pause just if anyone has any questions. But I do emphasize, like, please ask anything, regardless of how high or how low the question is. Just have that freedom. So why are you in your chair right now? And if we're talking about boot camps, or talking about development, or we're talking about getting a CS degree, or just like kind of in general, I want a higher paying job, I want security, I'm interested in tech, I have nothing else to do, anything like that. So if anyone has other reasons as to perhaps why they're here, I would welcome those answers. But I generally assume people kind of fall into one of these categories. So typically the life cycle of a developer. This has nothing to do necessarily with Web3. This is just a developer in general, right? So you start to learn a language, you become very rich with bugs and frustration, you understand your mistakes, you fix them, you add complexity to your project, you realize that with that added complexity, you need to learn more, and then the cycle starts all over again, right? So you go from like, oh, like I want to make something simple, let's say with like CSS and with HTML and JavaScript, just a basic front end thing. And then you're like, ooh, it'd be really cool if I could introduce like MUI or a framework or something else to add to the styling, or I want to add a database. So now I need to look at Firebase, or, I need to do research on this or that. So I think this cycle continuously repeats as you start to understand more, you realize how much there is to know. And so Web3 is exactly this, right? It's the same cycle. You have an idea, you execute it at a very basic level to get the fundamentals in place and to get basic functionality and MVP. And then as you develop these ideas, you continue to build it out and you learn more and more. So the whole thing is persistence, right? Any job you take, regardless of the industry, is going to require knowledge and tech that you don't know. And I'm like, I would say most anyone would agree with this. You come out of college, you come out of a boot camp, you come out of self-taught, and you're like, I know this. And they're like, great, we don't do that. So you have to learn this instead. And that's happened to me many times. Obviously, right now it's a little tricky, but networking is going to be one of your strongest tools. And I think personally, what I've found to be the cocktail of success is contributing to open source, continuing to develop your stack abilities, and personality. These three things I think are going to help you stand out. One of those things, if you are a specialist, that's fantastic, but I can obviously only speak to myself, and I have found being someone who is adaptable and being a rounded generalist is received quite well, because it's like, oh, you can pivot when necessary. Maybe we need you to do this, but hey, it'd be great if you could help out here. This is, I think, just Web 2, Web 3, doesn't really matter. Just I found in technology, these are kind of the formulas you need to stand out, because unfortunately right now there are a plethora of devs out there ranging in abilities, and securing something is certainly difficult. So here's an interesting example of a local, this is from Portland, junior developer posting. I won't assume anyone here is a junior or senior or anything in between, but I think this is still a good example of a current ask of someone who is new, right? So we have proficiency in HTML, CSS, JS, understood, sure, but then you've got, PWAs, you have Docker, push to deploys, you have RESTful API understanding, Git proficiencies, you're familiar with CMSs, you can do hoisting, you can do basic management, PHP, Python, VPS, AWS, you're flexible with the ability to work independently, you're efficient, you have management skills, you have organization skills, superior attention to details. I would say this is, really juicy. That's a lot for a junior to take on, kind of regardless of where you're at. And just a quick overview on that, just to highlight a couple things. Again, this is for a junior, right? So I think this is asking quite a bit for someone who's just entering the space. And I can personally say that I had a lot of imposter syndrome. Even to this day, I still have imposter syndrome in terms of my abilities. So when you see a job posting that has something like this, it's just, in my opinion, it can be quite crippling. That's not even talking about their preferred skills. So now here are their preferred skills. They want to see Django, they want to see Parcel, they want to see Gulp, they want Webpack building and understanding, they want GIST tools. All of this is, I would say, pretty over the top. And so what I want to kind of showcase by this is, as I mentioned earlier, choosing tech as a career above all else means you've always chosen to essentially be a student. You can never stop learning in technology. If you stop learning in technology, you become complacent, you become stagnant, and you will fall behind, right? And that's a reality. But I also think that's kind of the fun about being in technology is it's like you never leave college. You just always have to learn. And if you like learning, regardless of the rate at which you learn, as long as you are committed to improving your understanding of technology, that's what I think you need to be successful in technology, regardless if you go into blockchain or any kind of tech. So as I just said, some things to consider, the most important thing out of this slide, I would say, is just make sure whatever you're pursuing is something that you are interested in, because any job is going to have you pick up something that isn't in your current tool belt. I was fortunate enough to receive an internship at a place that was an ad forward marketing agency. So I did a lot of WordPress and I did a lot of PHP. And while I was very thankful for the opportunity, I pretty quickly realized, while this is great, I'm interested in other technologies. So if I'm going to learn something, then at least I want to learn something I'm interested in, because I'm still subscribing to learn regardless. And so I had an opportunity to take an internship with ConsenSys, and it certainly was the maximum level of jargon when I first came in, but I kind of owned that and said, you know what, I'm just going to give myself to be this student and be a sponge and soak up as much as I can, and we'll see what happens. And so it led to about a year worth of being contract, and then I went full time. But the point is just please pursue what you're interested in. And to a certain extent, I assume all of you are interested in blockchain because you are here. So let's talk about that. So now we're going to talk about blockchain and what the heck is blockchain. It's essentially a growing list of records called blocks, and each block contains a cryptographic hash that has a previous block, a timestamp, transaction data, and by design, blockchains are resistant to modification. A really interesting way to think about blockchain, in my opinion, to kind of remove some of the abstractions, is imagine a gigantic community board. And let's say I bought a house, right? So let's say I bought a house today. So now I'm going to put this on a piece of paper on the community board that everyone in this room can see. And it's Robbie bought a house today. And then Robbie mowed the lawn and did some landscaping work. And that's the next thing. Now, holding these two pieces of information together is a wax seal, right? And so now maybe I did basement work, maybe I did kitchen work, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And every time I do something different to my house, a wax seal is holding the previous information and the new information together. So now if I want to sell my house, let's say to Andrew, Andrew doesn't need to consult all of these people to see what I've done or to prove it. He can look at the wax seals and say, none of these wax seals are broken. They haven't been tampered with. So all of this information is true. All the receipts are there. Everything's there. Now I don't need to trust anything. I can trust the information that's available, right? And so this is essentially how like blockchain works, where you have this public ledger, you have this availability to view transactions that happen, and you don't have to trust in other people confirming these things, because collectively, due to the nature of blockchain, everyone who is a participant in blockchain is agreeing and confirming to this information. So lying becomes impossible, essentially. Because let's say everyone on this call is part of a blockchain and we're all validating nodes. Let's say here's another example. I ask Joseph, can I have $10 and I'll pay you back next week? And Joseph says, sure. So now a week goes by and Joseph's like, where's my $10? And I say, well, and so prior to that, we all agree. Joseph lent Robbie $10. He said he's going to pay him back in a week. Week goes by, I say, I never did that. Now everyone can look in their records and say, oh no, you did say that. So collectively, there's a consensus that you agreed to this, and we all say that. Now to like go back one, let's say I owed Joseph $10, but for Benjamin, who just joined the call, hello, I paid him off. I'm like, hey, I'll give you $5 to lie and to like be on my side and say that that never happened, right? So even if Benjamin says, oh yeah, Robbie doesn't owe Joseph any money, you still have the majority of people saying, no, that's not true. We all collectively recorded, and we have a higher percentage of people, it's a plus 51%, saying that Joseph lent Robbie $10. So it doesn't matter if one or two people claim otherwise, a majority of people are going to record the initial. So hopefully that makes sense, as just like you have a collective agreement on something. So if you hack, let's say, one person, that's one person. But now let's say you have hundreds of thousands of people, millions of people that have recorded this. So now you would have to like hack all of them in order to make that happen. And this becomes like essentially impossible unless we talk about like quantum computing, right? But that's a whole other kind of conversation. I'll pause here if anyone had any questions on that, or if anyone needed clarification.
Yeah, I think that was a really good explanation.
Great, awesome, cool. Okay, so this is how blockchain works on a really high level, and going over it now. Here is an example of the hack. So they're theoretically tamper-proof. They use fingerprints. So if we're looking here, this is our Genesis block. This is the first thing. This has a hash, and this has a previous hash. Obviously, there's no previous hash because this is our first block. Now we have our secondary block. So you'll notice 1Z8F. This now, so like Robbie bought a house. Yes, this is the first one, or Robbie borrowed $10, whatever. Something happened here. Then the second one is going to be building off of this information. So we see the previous hash here, and then this gets its unique hash itself. right? And so as we continue to do this, you're always taking the previous hash with you and then developing the new one. And this is how the blocks are being built. So now what happens if I confirm transaction 2 and now I'm on transaction 3, and now somebody goes back and they try to change this, they try to manipulate this information, right? So now we see that this hash is changing. This previous hash is going to say, wait a minute, I've got 6BQ1 recorded, you're trying to do H62Y, that's not correct. And so now it'll very quickly recognize this and say, like, you're trying to edit this, you're trying to tamper with this, that's a no-go, and it'll shut it down. So this is why blockchain is so interesting, is because of the security behind it, because it becomes so difficult to try to cheat the system. There has to be an agreement. There has to be a consensus. This is the whole point, and this is like what's so interesting about the protocol that comes with blockchain. So a few companies that are using exploring, I'm sure you've seen a couple of them, right? I would say a lot of them. And so what's really interesting is now we could talk about use cases when we talk about real estate, right? As I mentioned, real estate, this is a good example. I don't know if anyone here has ever bought or sold a home. It involves a lot of people, and it can be quite expensive, right? You have many people who you've never spoken to prior and won't afterward, who are coming in and just like the fees are quite heavy to get adjusters, and you have, you have all these people who are coming in to make money out of this. So what if you can remove all of them? So what if I can just say, I own this house, here's what I've done to it. You don't even have to ask me if it's true or not. It's all been recorded. And if you want it, here it is. This is what it costs. So we can remove a lot of middle people. Another interesting example is, are people here familiar with Kickstarter? Right? I assume to a certain degree, Kickstarter. So let's say I was selling a product. Let's say I was selling Rubik's Cubes, right? So I was making my own Rubik's Cubes, and you guys saw it and you're like, that's cool, I want to buy one. So you give money to Kickstarter, and you trust Kickstarter to then give me that money, and you trust Kickstarter to hold me accountable to send you the Rubik's Cubes. So Kickstarter is doing nothing other than being a platform, and they're taking fees from me for selling my product on Kickstarter. So what if I wanted to have a direct conversation? I create a smart contract that says, I have Rubik's Cubes, and if you pay me $5, you get a Rubik's Cube. And if I don't send it to you within a week, you get your money back automatically. So now we don't need anyone else. There are no fees. There's nothing like this. It just happens directly. Another really interesting use case could be the counterfeit market. Counterfeit market is a multi-billion-dollar market. Louis Vuitton, Christian Dior, Nike, there's a lot of things that go into this. What if you bought a pair of shoes online that were normally very expensive, and you found a really good deal online? How sure are you that they're not fake? Or how much would that sting? This actually happened to me recently, where I bought a pair of AirPod Pros off of Craigslist, and I checked the barcode that came with them, and it passed that they were real, but then I found out that they were still fake, right? And so they're just like very good fakes, and that stung because that was money out of my pocket. So what if there could be a hash or an address that is tied to a product? Let's say a pair of shoes. We'll go back to the shoes. So now if I bought a pair of shoes, I can trace that all the way back to the genesis, to the beginning. And so if I bought, let's say, a pair of Nike shoes, and let's say it was the third person who had owned these shoes, I could trace it back to the second person who bought them, to the first person who bought them, to the origin of them. So now I don't need to see a receipt. I don't care. I don't need all this proof. I can go to the very beginning and see that Nike said, yeah, we made these, and here's the address for them. And if the address doesn't match, then we didn't do it. So this becomes like really powerful, and this can disrupt the counterfeit market. And not only is the counterfeit market very profitable, but there are people who make companies out of debunking counterfeit, right? So it's like, companies out of companies, and it's all kind of based on like lies. So what if we can just try to strip all of this away? And so it gets super, super interesting in terms of all the use cases that blockchain could be applied to, and can just like streamline a lot of things and remove this concept of trust. So what's one current problem people see? We always have to use an intermediary. We use banks, credit card companies, or institutions that have cultivated a sense of trust, security, accountability. However, in recent years, those values have been violated in different ways. At the same time, there's been a digitalization that often occurs in all parts of our life. It's, this idea of like fiat. And if we talk about, our systems and why the dollar has value. It's because collectively we agree upon it. But what if like our systems collapse? And if we kind of remove ourselves from the United States and we look at, let's say, some places in South America where like corruption based on like the peso can cause like huge fluctuation. Argentina is a fantastic example of this, where let's say you work quite hard and you have your money, but the fluctuation of your fiat, maybe you've made $100 and a week later that's worth $70 or $80. And it has nothing to do with anything that you've done. It's just inherent in the system. So what if we could create a global economy or a global dollar that holds a value that is infinitely more stable than perhaps your country's coin, or your country's like fiat, which is really interesting to think about, of having this like digital currency that if you wanted to transition into yours, you could, without like getting into the weeds. An idea is there are cryptocurrencies, and these can fluctuate in terms of price based on supply, based on demand, based on DeFi, which is an abbreviation of decentralized finance and investing and all this. But then there are stable coins, and stable coins are generally always going to have a one-to-one with minute fluctuation that are comparable to, let's say, the US dollar. So if I bought $100 worth of DAI, which is DAI, 5 months from now, 2 years from now, whatever, that's still going to be $100. That's just not going to change. So if I wanted to turn that into something else, I could, but that's going to consistently be stable, which is really interesting. So what is a proposed solution for this? The idea is the same way that you would dial a number. Nowadays, there is no operator that is on the other line anymore. Whereas back in the day, if you wanted to call somebody, you would need an operator to connect you to someone. So now we've kind of streamlined that, and just we can do the same with blockchain. We can just start to streamline things. So developers have made a new protocol to encapsulate this idea of trust, security, accessibility without having to rely on a centralized format to do this. Right now we're trusting in the code. Now we're trusting in the system, opposed to this like governance that we have little say or control over. Here is a lovely illustration of it. We call it the blockchain butterfly. So you have distributed systems, cryptography, politics, economics. So these are just some examples of how blockchain can help deal with democracy, with e-commerce, with game theory, with Git and PGP and BitTorrent and artificial scarcity. It's so interesting to think about what can happen with blockchain and how we can utilize it. Because I think a lot of people just think it's like, oh, Bitcoin, and it's like money, and it's like a scary place to be, and you're going to lose all your money. It's so much more than that. It's a technology that can really be quite liberating. Another interesting example is there are these things that are now called like social tokens, which have no actual monetary value. So let's say I make a coin for myself, and they're Robbie coins. And let's say everyone here on this call, I'm going to give 100 Robbie tokens or 100 Robbie coins. Now I can have a service where I'm like, hey, I'm a developer, I'm a designer, I'm whatever. If you pay me 50 of my own coins back to me, I will grant you 30 minutes or 45 minutes or an hour to review whatever project, or I'll help you with something. Right? So now we have these like social incentivizing tokens, which are interesting because you can trade your personal coins for your time. So I think that becomes like really interesting of like, oh, like you want me to help you and I don't know you, I don't owe you a favor or anything, then you need to earn my coins by doing whatever I've decided. And then when you have enough of them that I've also decided, I will pay you back by providing a service that you're looking for, which I think is another like really interesting use case. So what's Ethereum? Ethereum is part of blockchain. It's a world computer. And I personally believe it's going to change how we interact, just like the internet did 20 years ago. It's more than just a currency, as I've been talking about. It's a platform for building decentralized applications, otherwise known as dApps. This can cover a lot. We have secure backbones for e-commerce. We have payments. We have transparency in its governments. We have integrated development environments for debugging, development, and deployment of Ethereum applications based on some of the libraries and the technologies that we've built around Ethereum. So it is right now the leading technology in blockchain for development that is something much more than just a coin. Everything I've described in this conversation so far is because of Ethereum, is because of smart contracts, because we can make contracts that declare these certain things. You can't do these things with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is essentially a gold. It is a standard of value that you can't like write a contract with gold, right? Gold is just this thing that has value and you can trade it for either something or for other types of value. But Ethereum is something in which we can build applications upon. And so it's, in my opinion, and perhaps I'm a little red-pilled because I work for ConsenSys, it's where the internet and where technology is moving forward. This is just a cute little illustration I found kind of talking about the smart contracts, how we are taking smart contracts we've created and we've developed, they're compiled, and then a result comes out of that. I've also been hammering you guys with a lot, so I thought just an illustration could help break it up. So blockchain market trends, right? This is where it gets quite interesting. As blockchain engineers, skills, designers, we see top 10, you see number one things, you know, this is clearly gaining a lot of traction. And it was like recent, like there are now like bigger players that are starting to adopt blockchain. I know it was like publicly announced that ConsenSys, the company I work for, has recently acquired Quorum. And Quorum is a blockchain effort that was built out of JP Morgan, right? And Baseline is working with Coca-Cola. So a lot of these very large entities that are very centralized, they're like almost the pinnacle of centralization, are now looking at blockchain to be really interesting enterprise solutions to help streamline some of their efforts. So this, I believe, is just like a good sense of proof that people are looking at this technology and they're wondering, can this help our business? And more times than not, the answer is probably. Another job posting example, right? We have responsibilities, requirements, bonus, benefits. So if we just quickly look at requirements, HTML5, CSS, JavaScript, React, TypeScript, Electron, Babel, you know, I would say looking at this just out of the gate, you'd say, okay, this is pretty reasonable. This is not too crazy in terms of the ask. But guess what? It's a Web3 posting, right? And so the idea is you don't have to be this, and we'll go back to it. You don't have to be this like wizard of blockchain in order to develop or to contribute to the blockchain space. And that's something that I really want to push on, is that, you know, if anyone here is a developer or designer or researcher, an auditor, whatever the case might be, or you're in sales or marketing, all of the skills you currently have, you can easily transfer into the Web3 world, and you just have to like find your particular place to contribute towards that. But we need a lot of help, it's a fact. So there are so many docs and refs, though. Where do I even start, right? 1milliondevs.com is one of the resources that I'm going to share with you guys. And so this is something that I was part of. And the idea behind this was we are trying to get to 1 million Ethereum developers. We loosely use the term developer because I think developer is not necessarily someone who's in a CLI or who's in VS Code who's actually developing. A developer is someone who's contributing to the space. You could be a designer, a researcher, or anything that I mentioned in the past. And these we consider developers that are not like hard, but they're like soft developers and hard developers, if we can maybe break that up. So 1milliondevs.com is an aggregator of aggregators to try to pull a lot of resources together. So if you're curious, we can help filter out where you are in your journey of I've never heard of this to I've kind of heard of it to, oh yeah, I know all about this. You can find pockets that you can contribute towards. Another excellent resource is going to be the ConsenSys Academy. Right, these are real efforts and programs to help developers learn the tech required to explore this space. So if you're particularly interested in development and getting in and doing code, then ConsenSys Academy undoubtedly, I believe, is, and it's not even because I work for ConsenSys. I took the boot camp from ConsenSys before I even joined ConsenSys, and it is a fantastic way to get your head around Solidity, which is the main language we use to develop smart contracts. And this will absolutely get your feet wet, way more than your feet wet, or get almost your eyeballs wet in terms of what's happening. How do I use this information? How can I develop my ideas? And the people who are graduates of it have gone on to work for Ernst & Young, for IBM, for Google, for other companies, right? A link to this is going to be at learn.consensys.net. A good example is they have free webinars. They cost you absolutely nothing. You can just go, and an example is, let's say you're kind of interested in the development, but maybe you want to get into UX a little more. Well, here's a UX for blockchain webinar that you can just observe for yourself, and you have people in this space discussing this stuff. And there are a number of them as well. So this is an excellent free, and if you choose to, subscribe, paid effort to help expedite your process and contributing to this space. The bootcamp starts September 1st. If anyone is curious to look at what that means to really become a developer in this space, again, I think Academy is the strongest when it comes to not only the resources, but also the cohort and the offerings to help each other grow. Okay, so no more shilling that. Let's talk about money, right? I need money. I don't want to do any of this. I just got out of school, whatever the case is. Really interesting thing are bounties, and something that a company called Gitcoin provides, that's GITCOIN, is there is a lot of work, just as I described, that ranges technical documents, find bugs, is this mobile friendly? I need you to do security. I need a check on fuzzing. I want, fix iPhone double-click zooming, and website is slow and sluggish on Firefox. We can see this in the example I provided. You can contribute to open source and you can get paid for it. And so the way this works is, first you would need a wallet, and we could talk about that for a second. I would certainly say that you should look at MetaMask. That's METAMASK. And so this is a plugin, an extension that you can get for, let's say, Google Chrome or Firefox or Brave. And this gives you an address. So now what happens is you have an address. Essentially, it's like a wallet in your back pocket, right? It's the same thing. So now if I go on to Gitcoin and I see some bounties that are interesting to me and I want to do them, I say, hey, my name is Robbie and I want to do this one. I do that work, and then the person who made that bounty pays my address, pays my wallet. So instead of just putting the money on the table, it immediately goes into my back pocket, into my wallet. So I don't have to worry about it. It's there. And then if I want to do whatever with that, I certainly can. But this is a really interesting way where you can build your resume as an open source contributor and also get paid for it. And some of the bounties, if there's a group of people, let's say there's 3 or 4 of you and you want to tag up on a bounty, can be a considerable amount. I've seen bounties and grants that range anywhere from $50 US. This is in crypto. I'm talking conversions here, 50 US, all the way up to 10,000 or 20,000, right? And obviously they get a little more intensive in terms of the commitment that you have to put behind them. But again, you could essentially be this cowboy that just works open source and makes a living out of that depending on your chops. So really interesting thing. And again, that is Gitcoin. And you can, without feeling like you have to remember or write all this stuff down, you can find all of this on 1milliondevs.com. So what about gaming to use as a way to learn a little bit about Solidity? We have crypto zombies, which I can showcase after this if people were interested in. Crypto zombies, essentially, I don't know if anyone here is familiar with Flexbox Froggy, or I think there's Flexbox Froggy is a lot of fun. And there's, what's the other one? Is it Grid Towers? It might be Grid Towers that shows you about Grid. Essentially, Crypto Zombies is a gamified way to teach you how to write your own contract that does a very good job of step-by-step walking you through what it takes. And at the very end of it, you realize oh, wow, this isn't that different from JavaScript. I understand objects and methods and passing in variables into functions and pulling them out of, and management of state. And it's great. And it's kind of fun. You make a horde of zombies that does your bidding, and who doesn't want that? So how do you keep up with events? Another effort that I am part of is the Biddle Network. Not build, Biddle. And so that's BUIDL. And on Meetup, this is, we're quite large. There's about 53,000 people globally that are part of this effort, and we're all over the place. And the idea is we want to focus on blockchain education infrastructure development and community engagement. So you can go on Meetup and you can look up the Biddle network and you can just see a huge list of events. And what's really interesting that's happened because of COVID is a lot of meetups that were, let's say, in Dubai or in London or in San Francisco are now just open to everyone to join. So no longer are they just kind of these hubs where like, let's go get a beer at some pub in this place that I don't live anywhere close to. It's like, well, no, everyone just like hang out online. So it's really opened up the doors to be part of meetups that I think normally you wouldn't have the ability to just because physically you weren't there. So the Biddle network is a really incredible place, and I'm one of the admins of it. And if anyone here was kind of curious to find out more about this after this call, I'd be more than happy to share my personal information and keep you in the loop with these efforts and how you can just continue to join meetups like this and other meetups that get a little deeper or they're a little softer, whatever you're interested in. So many web technologies have matured and have established ecosystems. That's a fact. Blockchain and Ethereum are some of the newest technologies on the scene. The ecosystem needs new people with new ideas. These sorts of technologies and these revolutions only happen once in a while. And we don't right now know its potential, just as people who, when the internet first came out and when we were initially still like developing computers, and I remember like reading about how when computers first came around, they were ginormous and very expensive. And the idea of like, you could maybe sell 5 computers a year. This is before they were, like they were on your desk. We're talking like really large ones that you had to like do punches in order to retrieve information. Now it's become so normal to have a computer. But I don't even think that people, when they first came out, let's say in the 70s, could have anticipated that. So it's hard to predict what's going to happen when it comes to this sort of technology. But I think it's very obvious that there are a lot of very smart people that are very dedicated to seeing how far we can propel this forward. So it's just waking up, and it's quite exciting to be part of. But in conclusion, with the plethora of developers, particularly those early in their career, standing out can be very difficult, as I mentioned. What I want to expose developers to is a technology that's yet untapped by the masses. And I want everyone here to realize that they have the ability to contribute to this space if they decided to. And that's a very empowering feeling, or at least I hope it's empowering, is right now you could maybe cure a bounty and make some money. Right now, you can write an article, you can develop something, you can design something, you can research something, you can write about something, and it'll be used, it'll be seen, it'll be shared. And that's, I think in technology, that's really fantastic. And in my opinion, that's really what it's about. So that's the end of my initial presentation. I'm gonna exit out of this. I do have this form that at the end, I would love, or actually now I could perhaps share this. And if you did have time to fill this out, perhaps after this conversation, I'd be very appreciative just to give me some feedback. And if you wanted to share your email and your name so I could keep you in the loop with these things. And of course, it doesn't go anywhere weird. It's just like for my records and to keep you in the loop with the Biddle network or with some offerings. I would be very appreciative of that. Obviously, that'll help me grow as a presenter as well. But I'm happy to take some questions right now. Otherwise, if people are interested, I can show a couple of dApps, some I've made and some that exist, to kind of show like what's going on the development side of Ethereum.
Okay. Anyone is welcome to ask questions with unmuting their mic. And you can ask questions in the chat, which is in the top right of the screen as well. And yeah, no, it's a great talk, Robbie. Very well explained.
Oh, thank you. Well, I suppose if we don't have any questions, I can show an example of, let's say, just 2 quick applications. So here's one that I've made, and it's a very, very simple one. And so what this is dealing with is a token that's called, without getting into the nitty gritty, it's an ERC-721 token. So this token doesn't have any monetary value unless someone decides they want to pay me for it. But what it is it's essentially no more than like a piece of art, right? But it's a thing that I own. So an example is, let's go to this color wheel. And I want someone to tell me when to stop, and we're going to pick that color. Anyone just give me a sign.
Stop.
There it is. Okay. So we've got C33C3C. Wow. What a hex. So we're going to take this hex, and what we're going to do is, oh, and here's an example. This is MetaMask, this cute little fox up here. So right now I'm on Ganache, and to kind of show what Ganache is, this is Ganache. So there are 3 stages. Do you have a list of those meetup groups, etc.? I do, yes. So there are 3 stages when it comes to development for Ethereum. There's your local development, there's test network development, and then there's mainnet development. So your local development is going to be exactly that. If I'm developing for the blockchain, I have a local blockchain that's on my computer and nowhere else. So when I turn it off, it just goes away. Or it's like recorded locally, but no one else can experience this because it's on my computer. Just like anyone is like, go visit my website at localhost 3000. You can't, right? Because it's on your computer. So now I'm on my local, and we can see I'm connected because I made my application. Here is my wallet that I described earlier, and my wallet has an address, and so I can see this address matches this. So it's like, cool, I'm connected. So I'm going to take this hex value that we were told this is the one, and I'm going to mint it. So I'm going to make this. And MetaMask is going to say, hey, do you want to do this? So now what's happening right here is, in order to make a transaction happen on Ethereum, you have to pay for it. And this is paid through with gas. So what happens is, just as we talked about earlier, I'm going to say, hey, Joseph, can I borrow $10? He says, sure. Everyone's going to see that. In order for this to happen, for the other people to say, yeah, I see that, what's the incentive for them, right? I don't have time to observe this. That's stupid. So they're going to become validators. And if you're a validator, you're going to get paid a percentage of money. This is like proof of work. So everyone who's like, oh yeah, that happened, I'm going to confirm it, they're going to get a small amount of money for that. So now if you continue to validate all these blocks and these transactions, you become a miner and you are pushing the blocks forward. This is your incentive to kind of be an observer and a validator in this space. So this doesn't cost real money because this is local. This is like fake money or test money. I'm going to confirm this. And this is going to happen. We're going to see a transaction happen. So now if I go ahead and I refresh this, and we should be able to scroll down. And if we scroll down, we see right here, C33C3C. So what now happens is I now own this color. This is now a token that I own. So if I wanted to take this token or this color and give it to one of you as the owner, I could. And what would happen is, again, this would be another transaction. So I say, okay, I've got this color and I want to send it to Benjamin. You guys would all be validators again, and you'd say, okay, Robbie made that color, and now he's sending that color. I then pay a gas fee again to make sure that this happens and it's observed on the blockchain. And now Benjamin becomes the owner of this, and this is all recorded on the blockchain. Yeah, there you go, Benjamin. You've got this lovely red color. So this is local testing, right? So now let's move on to testing that is going to be live online, but it's not mainnet. It's still going to be test ether. So up here, I am connected to Ganache, which is part of the Truffle suite. And again, you don't have to remember all this. This could be on 1milliondevs.com. You can find this information out. So Truffle suite is essentially a suite that allows you to develop in this space really easily. It involves Drizzle, which helps with front-end application or front-end connection, Ganache, which is your local testnet, and then Truffle, which is going to be in your command line that allows you to do some really interesting things. So now I'm going to change over to Rinkeby. Rinkeby is a place where you can acquire free ether, or rather you can use a faucet to get free ether, and you can use that to test, to kind of simulate mainnet. So now we're stepping away from local, and now we're getting into tests. So now if I put this online, anyone here with test ether could now participate in this, and they can experiment with this without having to worry about paying real money. So this is still kind of monopoly money. It's just monopoly money that now everyone can see, opposed to it just being on my computer. So here's a contract that I've written for this. It's very simple. Perhaps you can see it. It's hello world. That's all it is. It's a hello world contract. So I'm making a string. I'm going to make sure it's public. Here's a message. We have our constructor. And there's a little bit of syntax in here, but essentially Because it's a lower level, you have to be a little more declarative. So you have to talk about the memory. We're going to make this public. So it has compiled. I see that. So now I'm going to run this. I'm going to deploy my contract. And now this is going to pop up. My MetaMask is going to be like, okay, you're about to deploy a contract. Let's see that happen. It's going to confirm. So now we can observe this on Etherscan, which we can talk about in a moment. But once this passes, and this should pass in just a moment. Oh, there we go. Looks like, there we go. We see our deployed contract. So now what I can do is I can go to my update, which has been declared here. And I have to make it a string. So I put it in quotes and I'm going to say, hello, everyone, in caps, because I yell. And I'm going to update. And now when I update, this is now being pushed to the blockchain again, because I'm updating my contract. I'm changing the state. So again, I pay the gas fee. You have the observer. So we're going to say, okay, this is happening. So I'm confirming it. We're going to wait for this for this block to cure. So for the validators to say this happened, this is cool. It gets posted. And we can always go here to see the progress. Actually, let's see in our test. I go our link beat. It looks like it's still coming through. So we're going to, yep. So we see the block number. And it's going to be reflected in a short while. Come on. Looks like it just confirmed. I got, you can't see on your screen, but I can see on mine. Let's see if I give this a refresh if it went through. Interesting. Well, it definitely went through. So now if I go to message, did it happen? No, it's still running. If I go to message and I click on my message, we see that string, which doesn't require me pinging MetaMask because all I'm doing is retrieving information from the blockchain. I'm not posting anything to it, so it doesn't require gas. I'm just recalling information, and I can see hello, everyone. And if I were to go into this update and I were to change this, same thing would happen. MetaMask would say, do you want to change this? You're going to pay for this. And I'd say, okay, that transaction happens. Here we go. Success. We see the block. We see 2 block confirmations. We see this is from my address. This is my contract address. We see how much it cost me in terms of the test ether and the transaction hash if we needed to look this up later on. So now everything has been recorded. So if I continue to make changes to this deployed contract and I change this text again and again and again and again, we can look at all of the iterations of all the strings that I ever updated it to. So this is how we have our breadcrumb trail. So this is test ether. And then mainnet ether is everything I've described when it comes to those fees and that gas that you're paying. This is now where you're dealing with real money. So I don't have one to show per se, but you can just imagine this situation as I've just shown you would happen, but it would just cost me money to actually do it. And that would be mainnet. So you have local environment, you have test environment, which is going to be like Rinkeby, or another popular one is Ropsten. These are popular test networks. And then you have mainnet. And mainnet is where you're spending actual money to do certain things that have fiat value. And so I also if you're let's say a React developer and you're really interested in pushing forward on this, a really powerful system. I'm sure you're familiar with Create React App, which is what a lot of people do. There is Create ETH App, which is pretty much the same exact thing. And I can share this with anyone. You would do a yarn create ETH app, my ETH app, or essentially just create my ETH app, and it spins up an application for you or a dApp that gives you the boilerplate the same way that NPX Create React App does, that sets up a lot of the scaffolding for your ABIs, your contracts, and a subgraph. And so it's really, really fast, the same way that spinning up a React project is. If you're, let's say, a Python developer and you're like, I don't care about that stuff, then you can look at, let's say, Brownie. And Brownie is a really interesting library that you can use to do a lot of development as a Python developer in the Web3 space. And again, if anyone was curious, I can share it. Otherwise, just Google like ETH Brownie, and you can see, the documentation is quite lovely, where you just init, you bake, and then you just can kind of work through this, and you can compile contracts and you can go through this. There's Solidity, and as I mentioned, Viper. Solidity is certainly more popular to develop contracts. Viper is more Python forward, and it's a little more secure, but it's certainly not as popular. And yeah, so it's, again, this is all pushing on whatever you know now, you could leverage a ton of that. So I know I've been talking for certainly some time. I'm gonna ease up on it. And yeah, if anyone had any questions, comments, please share. And I'd be happy to try to answer as best I can.
Now, Robbie, with the ConsenSys Academy starts on September 1st. How often do they run the boot camps?
The boot camps, I want to say they run, so there are a couple of things. There's like the larger boot camp, and that runs a few times a year. I want to say in total it's about 16 weeks long, and that comes with the support of alumni, mentors, and of course us as the faculty. And then there are other options as well, where if you didn't want to go through this full certification, there is a Coursera course that talks about the use cases of blockchain, which obviously, as Coursera is like at your own pace, you do, and you get like a cert out of that. And then there are some like kind of like more like modular little certifications you can get if you're interested in particular things. But the boot camp itself is like all encompassing, and that kicks up on the 1st. And yeah, it's about 16 weeks, and that's a few times a year that runs. Yeah.
And the students they go through that. Obviously, ConsenSys looks at some of the ones they may want to hire as they go through the boot camp. Yeah,
absolutely. I think it would be, it's obviously in our best interest if you're kind of homegrown, then we keep you close. So if you have the promise and you show some chops and you're an alumni of it, and you want to dig deeper in terms of, I want to work on MetaMask, or I want to get really deep, and I know Java, I want to work with on the protocol level with like Besu or Hyperledger, without like going into jargon land. But yeah, if you're an alum and you want to continue to contribute, if we can't hire you, then of course we do our best to try to position you so you can continue to work in the Web3 space, because there are a number of companies and a number of larger companies like IBM, for example, that have divisions, or Ernst & Young that have divisions dedicated toward blockchain research and development. So it's not like even Google or Facebook, Libra and Nike. So there are a lot of Web2 enterprises that are doing research that also need developers in that space as well.
And besides Coursera, are there any other recommendations for additional learning or to become familiar with it?
Absolutely. There is one gentleman who is really, really incredible. His name is Gregory. And if you go on YouTube, DApp University, this gentleman right here does a number of tutorials that are really beneficial. And he also goes on to talk about Ethereum when it comes to the scarcity of it, and with like ETH 2.0 coming up, and staking, and how to be a blockchain developer, and using certain libraries like Web3.js versus Ethers.js, and Solidity for beginners, what the heck is DeFi, how you can do arbitrage flash loans and technically borrow incredible amounts of money in a block and then return that money back. So without falling into a couple holes, I would say that this is an excellent, of course, it's on YouTube, free resource. And then on Udemy, depending on how you pronounce it, there are a couple of great Solidity courses as well. That, the only trick when it comes to this is because Solidity is a newer language and it is constantly evolving. As it evolves, of course, the syntax is going to change. So normally in a course that was made 1 or 2 years ago, you would have to do research in terms of the break cases that have happened. If you're using 0.5 and now you're at 0.8, and you try to compile it, it might not work. So you've got to do a little work on your end. But again, these resources are free, if not very close to free. So you just, gotta push a little more. But they're excellent. Steven Grinder, I believe is his name, on Coursera, and he gives really excellent courses. Or I'm sorry, not Coursera, Udemy. And he gives really excellent courses on Solidity.
Cool. That's good stuff. And another real important question here: when are Robbie coins going to be available?
I actually, funny enough, I do have Robbie coins. Yeah, I have RFK tokens, which I described earlier, are those like social tokens. And yeah, if you guys fill out that form, and if you give me an address, and if you don't have an address, all you have to do is get MetaMask, which is a plugin. You don't have to reveal any weird or sensitive information. It's very easy to acquire. You'll get a mnemonic phrase. Please, please, please write that down and put it somewhere safe, because if you ever forget your password, the only way to recover your account is through your mnemonic phrase. So do not lose that. Do not give it to anyone. That is like your social security number. It's a very special thing. So keep that. And if you do get a wallet and you give me your address, which is public, I'd give you my wallet now, or my public address, I'll send you some Robbie coins. And they're worth nothing, but you could have some.
Yeah, I definitely want a couple.
Yeah, I'll send you 10,000 of them. I have millions of them.
Awesome.
Hey, Robbie, I had a quick question for you. So when you reference Solidity as being kind of the starting point, do you move past Solidity as a language as you become more advanced, or did I understand that wrong? Where you move into a different language, or is always Solidity?
It's generally, it kind of depends on what you want to do. That's a great question, by the way. Thank you. You are always going to be, if you are working on contract development, you're predominantly going to stay with Solidity. You know, you can play around with, you know, as like eWASM comes out, and this is going to be this idea of like WebAssembly, and like WebAssembly plays really well with Rust. Rust, if you haven't explored it, is a super cool language. It's actually like my personal favorite language, even though I'm not super proficient at it, but it's so cool. Rust is going to be a language that you can develop contracts in because of eWASM. There's, you know, as I mentioned, there's Viper, but I would say there are some interesting holes you could fall down when it comes to Solidity. So making a contract, just as the one I'm sharing now, this Hello World one, it's like, yeah, Solidity, great. But if you wanted to make something that was a little more in depth, or try to make your own contract that was like a bank, where it's like I could deposit money and then pull it out, but I can't like double pull out. You know, there are a lot of like edge cases. This is where you just have to spend more time with the language. But I would say you would stay in Solidity for like 90%, and then like maybe touch on a couple other things.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions? Okay, well, I want to thank Robbie for coming out today. That was definitely really informative and a great talk. And I will be looking into the different resources and links that Robbie provided. Really good information. I want to thank everyone for coming out today. And yeah, thanks again, Robbie. And we will see you guys all again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, take care.